Hi again, West Hill. Thank you for listening to the story so far. I hope you're enjoying it. We're going to read a little bit more today, and we're now on chapter 3, A Little Snack for Toothless. The next day, the hooligans got ready for war against the Dreader, and Toothless refused to go. It's not Toothless's fault that Big Bully Dreader is in the harbour. Nothing to do with Toothless. Toothless sniffed from under the nice warm covers. Okay, said Hiccup. You stay here if you don't want to help, but don't leave this room, Toothless. My father is cross enough with you already. Hiccup looked very silly in his battle kit. He was now so skinny, his belt kept slipping down over his hips and tripping him up. Toothless do as he's told. Toothless a good dragon, said Toothless. No chewing, no pooing, no burning, Toothless knows. But as soon as Toothless heard Hiccup's footsteps padding out the front door, and the sound of those hooligans thundering down the hillside towards the harbour, Toothless poked out his snout from under the covers. But poor Toothless is hungry, he moaned. Nobody cares about poor Toothless starving to death. They're all so selfish. Toothless's fat little belly gave a protesting rumble, as if in agreement. Toothless patted it comfortingly. Don't you worry, lovely little tummy. Toothless'll feed you. You can rely on Toothless. He gave a sudden squeal of excitement. He had just remembered. A couple of months ago he had buried 3 eggs outside the great hall. Toothless often hid little snacks like this so that he could enjoy them at a later date. But with all the excitement about the Dreader, he had completely forgotten about his particular little treat. Toothless swooped through the smoke in the empty hall and out through the open door. There was a scrabbly patch of grass and gorse bushes and bracken in front of the great hall, and Toothless flew over it several times, his sharp little green gauge eyes searching for something. Eventually he found the right spot and started digging vigorously with his front paws. The ferns shook manically for a couple of minutes, mud spraying upwards like a dirt volcano, until Toothless unearthed 3 large eggs, a beautiful lime green in colour, and lightly speckled with pale brown freckles. Toothless licked his lips with a forked tongue, mouth watering already. Food. There was nothing Toothless liked more than a delicious egg. Boiled eggs, fried eggs, coddled eggs, you name it. Toothless liked them any way at all. But Toothless was particularly fond of a baked egg, cooked for just long enough that the yolk was still runny, but the white was still firm and scrumptious. Toothless began to roll the eggs towards the open door of the great hall, using the end of his snout and his wings. It was quite tricky rolling 3 of them at once. They tended to go off in opposite directions, and he had to be very gentle for fear of cracking them. Once he'd got them through the front door, it was easier, for the great hall had a smooth dirt floor, just right for rolling. Triumphantly, Toothless rolled the eggs over the floor, and 1, 2, 3, right into the ashes of the fire smoking on the hearthstone. Then, cooing with greed, he tenderly scooped the ash over them with his wings, so that they were completely buried in the hot grey dust. Toothless's skin, like all dragon skin, was fairly fireproof, so he could do this without hurting himself. Chirruping with satisfaction and drooling with excitement, Toothless perched on one leg on top of the meat spit to wait for them to cook, blinking fondly at the little mounds in the ash. After about 2 minutes, something strange happened. The ash round the eggs turned lime green, and the eggs themselves began to shake, and one of them shook so hard that it wobbled itself right out of the ash and rolled onto the floor again. Squeaking with alarm, Toothless shepherded it back into the ash again, muttering, No, 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 not ready yet. You're not ready. But no sooner had he got one egg safely back and buried in the ash, than another rolled off in a completely different direction. Squealing and baffled, Toothless swooped after one and then the other, scooping them back into the fire with his wings, like an anxious mother hen with her disobedient chicks. But they kept on rolling out again, and before long Toothless was out of breath, indignant, and covered in ash. Finally he manoeuvred one of the eggs all the way back from the other side of the room for the 5th time, and buried it lovingly next to its fellows, and there was a brief moment where all three lay still, as they should be. There, said Toothless with a grunt of satisfaction, and all three gave a violent tremble at the same time, as if they were in secret communication with one another, and rocked fiercely out of the fire-bed, bowling around the room in wild, wandering circles. Toothless sat down heavily in the fire in his bewilderment, putting out the last remains of the flames with his bottom. He followed the lunatic progress of the eggs with his eyes as they looped crazily around the dust of the great hall, gathering speed as they went. What's going on? Squeaked Toothless. Stay here and do as you're told. Food shouldn't run away like this. It should stay still and let itself be cooked, like any self-respecting sausage or carrot. It shouldn't be running around the room as if it had a mind of its own, weaving its way through the chair legs and generally showing off. One of the eggs had come to rest against a table leg. Crouching down low, Toothless stalked the egg slowly, as if it were prey. The egg did not move. Feeling braver, Toothless edged a little closer. The egg remained motionless. Toothless froze, ready to pounce, whiskers quivering faintly, every muscle tense. The egg was eggily still. Toothless sprang, and just at the last minute the egg wobbled wildly to life, swerving out of the way and skittering out of reach, so that poor Toothless's paws closed on nothing, and the momentum carried him forward, and he bashed his nose on the table leg. Meow! Toothless let out a strangled meowing noise, like a cat that has had its tail pulled. And tee-hee-hee-hee came the sound from the egg, gently vibrating on the spot. Toothless could have sworn it was giggling. Muffled, giggling noises came from the other 2 eggs on the other sides of the room. Now poor Toothless was thoroughly terrified. He stuck his tail between his legs and whimpered pathetically. Haunted eggs? Moaned poor Toothless. Probably inhabited by the ghosts of vengeful suppers that Toothless had burgled over the years. Let's face it, there was loads of those. It was the only explanation. Just as he was backing away, the spines on his back quivering like porcupine needles, there was a loud crack, and crooked little lines appeared all over the lime-green surface of the egg. Crack, crack, crack. A hard little head punched its way through the eggshell. It had to be hard for the shells of dragon eggs are nearly a centimetre thick. A tiny little dragon with huge yellow eyes and a black smudge on the end of its nose blinked back at an astonished Toothless. And after a gobsmacked minute while Toothless digested this latest surprising development, "Papa!" squeaked the little smudgy dragon. "Papa!" With every papa, the tiny creature head-butted the shell that was still partly encasing him, until, with a final crack, the dragon unfolded its wet little wings and the egg fell apart entirely into tiny smashed pieces of green. The dragon was far smaller than the size of the egg that had encased it, a little larger perhaps than a baby chick or duckling, but not a lot. It was covered all over with lime green goo, and as it shook out its wings, the startling orange of a scallop coral, it flung a fine rain of gooey stuff over Toothless himself. "Ugh, yucky!" groaned Toothless. The little dragon grinned. "Papa," it repeated, looking up at him lovingly. Toothless was horrified. "Me? Toothless not your papa. Toothless hates babies." The dragon baby ignored this and hopped towards Toothless enthusiastically. "Papa!" Crack, crack, crack. The other 2 eggs split apart too, on opposite sides of the room. "Papa!" 2 more little dragon babies hopped out of the smashed remains of their shells and hopped unsteadily towards Toothless. The second one was yellow rather than green and had a remarkably flat head, because it had spent its egghood bashing against the walls of its shell. The third was a bit smaller and bright blue, kept on falling over because it had a rather wobbly leg and a permanent case of the hiccups. It tended to charge ahead in an uncontrolled fashion, as if its legs had run away with it, before listing to the left and landing on its bottom and saying "whoops" in a surprised fashion. Although why it was surprised, I have no idea, because it fell over pretty much every 2 minutes, so it shouldn't have been much of a shock when it did it again. It also had a terrible cold, so every now and then it added "achoo" to the whoops and ows. "Papa!" squealed the second one. "It's our papa! It whoops! Oh, ashoo!" said the third one. "Toothless, not your papa," said Toothless firmly, but backing away none the less as the little creatures rushed towards him in a flurry of green goo. Toothless not like babies. Babies is yucky and ever so soppy. These babies were certainly all that, but they carried on rushing towards him in a yucky, soppy, gooey mess none the less, and he had to take off suddenly so that the little one bashed into all the others, and Toothless flapped up to the perch on one of the ceiling beams and blinked down at them furiously. They couldn't yet fly, so they couldn't follow him. Just they leapt up and down, chirping and clicking furiously. Toothless tucked his head under his wing and pretended to go to sleep. 5 minutes later, they were still there, cheeping and clicking and bouncing more hysterically than ever. Toothless would never live it down with the other dragons if he kept on being followed about by soppy little dragon babies. Right, thank you again for joining me, and we'll find out what happens to Toothless and the dragon babies soon. Bye!